Blake Lively wants the world to believe she's standing up against workplace misconduct, that she's a victim. But what if we told you that while she was pointing fingers at Justin Baldoni, she was sweeping something much darker under the rug? Because behind the scenes of her failed lifestyle brand, Preserve, insiders say her own brother, Eric Lively, was running a chaotic, toxic, and downright creepy operation. We're talking affairs, drugs, and a literal bed in the office. In 2014, actress Blake Lively, known for her roles in Gossip Girl and The Age of Adeline, launched what was touted as her passion project, Preserve, a lifestyle brand aimed at promoting artisanal goods, storytelling, and a handcrafted aesthetic. The platform was framed as a mix of e-commerce and editorial, with Lively promising to preserve traditions and crafts often overlooked by mainstream retail. From the outset, Preserve drew comparisons to Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop, though Lively insisted her brand had a more grounded, rustic approach, focused on American craftsmanship and community storytelling. However, the site was met with mixed reviews. Many criticized its confusing layout, vague mission, and high prices for what were perceived as relatively basic items. Despite its celebrity backing, Preserve struggled to find a consistent audience. Critics argued the brand lacked a clear identity, attempting to be both a commerce platform and a lifestyle publication without fully succeeding at either. The editorial content was often described as overly poetic or indulgent, with product descriptions that sometimes overshadowed the items themselves. Behind the scenes, things reportedly weren't much better. Internal accounts suggest the project was marked by poor leadership, rapid hiring and firing, and a lack of experience in running a business of this nature. Lively, though involved creatively, allegedly lacked the infrastructure and business acumen necessary to lead a company with such ambitions. By October 2015, just 14 months after its launch, Preserve was officially shut down. Lively herself admitted publicly that the site had launched prematurely, telling Vogue in an interview that she knew the brand was not where it needed to be. It's not making a difference in people's lives, whether superficially or in a meaningful way, she said at the time. What the public didn't know then was that the downfall of Preserve may have been driven by more than just branding missteps. According to recent claims from former employees, there may have been much deeper dysfunction within the company, ranging from toxic workplace dynamics to allegations of misconduct involving those closest to Lively, most notably her brother Eric. As the glossy surface of Preserve began to crack, troubling details started to seep through, suggesting that the site's implosion was not simply the result of poor branding or inexperience, but the product of a deeply unhealthy workplace culture. At the center of these emerging claims is Blake Lively's older brother Eric Lively, a former actor-turned-photographer and creative director for Preserve. While his role may have sounded artistic on paper behind the scenes, multiple sources now allege that Eric wielded an outsized influence on the day-to-day operations of the company, and not always in a professional or appropriate manner. According to accounts from former employees and whistleblowers, Eric Lively's presence in the workplace was not only constant, it was unnerving. Allegedly, he maintained a bed in the office. Yes, a bed. Not a couch, not a break room futon. A bed which he reportedly used for naps, overnight stays, and in some accounts, meetings that made female staff feel uncomfortable. Several anonymous former staffers have come forward claiming that Eric's behavior created a chilling atmosphere of unpredictability. Reports suggest mood swings, controlling behavior, and emotional outbursts that left team members on edge. One source described the culture as manipulative and draining, where boundaries were blurred and professionalism seemed optional, if not discouraged entirely. But perhaps most damning are the allegations that Blake Lively was not only aware of these issues, but allegedly enabled them. Critics argue that instead of stepping in to establish a healthier workplace or distancing the company from her brother's growing list of red flags, she doubled down on his role, keeping him in a position of authority despite the chaos swirling beneath the surface. And this is where the public perception begins to fracture. Blake Lively, often portrayed in media as America's sweetheart, a glamorous yet relatable star, wife to Ryan Reynolds and mother of 4, was now being scrutinized not for a failed brand, but for her silence and, in some views, complicity. Did Blake Lively knowingly cover up a toxic environment to protect her family and her image? Either she knew what was happening, or she didn't want to know. And in either case, the implications are serious. While no formal complaints or lawsuits have been made public, the consistency and detail in these testimonials raise significant ethical concerns about the inner workings of Preserve and cast a long shadow over what once appeared to be a glossy, purpose-driven brand. As the allegations of a toxic workplace surrounding Preserve continue to swirl, the focus naturally shifts to the woman at the center of it all, Blake Lively. Not just a figurehead, Lively wasn't simply lending her name to the lifestyle brand. She was its founder, its visionary, and by all accounts, its hands-on leader. So, how much did she really know about what was going on behind the scenes? While no formal complaints or lawsuits have been made public, the consistency and detail in these testimonials raise significant ethical concerns about the inner workings of Preserve and cast a long shadow over what once appeared to be a glossy, purpose-driven brand. As the allegations of a toxic workplace surrounding Preserve continue to swirl, the focus naturally shifts to the woman at the center of it all, Blake Lively. Not just a figurehead, Lively wasn't simply lending her name to the lifestyle brand. She was its founder, its visionary, and by all accounts, its hands-on leader. So, how much did she really know about what was going on behind the scenes? When Preserve launched in July of 2014, it was presented as a deeply personal project. In interviews, Blake spoke passionately about wanting to curate stories and connect artisans with people who value craftsmanship. The narrative was warm, idealistic, and filled with poetic intention. But as the carefully lit photo shoots and handcrafted goods filled the pages of Preserve's website, an entirely different story was allegedly unfolding in the background. An anonymous employee of Preserve said, quote, "There were moments when Blake was in the office and people would suddenly get very quiet. We didn't know if she was there to create or to cover for someone. What makes these allegations so troubling is the blurred line between family and business. Eric Lively, her older brother, wasn't just an employee. He was reportedly one of the site's most powerful figures, holding creative and operational authority. That kind of nepotism, while not uncommon in Hollywood, takes on a darker tone when allegations of misconduct, manipulation, and inappropriate behavior are involved. Insiders claim that Blake was made aware, at least on some level, of the dysfunction her brother was causing. Several former staffers believed Lively was either unwilling or unable to intervene due to personal loyalty. And while Blake may not have directly participated in the alleged toxicity, critics argue that her silence, or worse, her passive endorsement, was enough to allow it to flourish. She claims to value authenticity and empowerment. So where was the accountability when her brother was making her employees feel intimidated and uncomfortable? The image Blake had carefully cultivated of a progressive, mindful entrepreneur passionate about social good is now in stark contrast with these behind-the-scenes accounts. Some say the juxtaposition feels almost cinematic. A beloved actress who built a brand around compassion and community, all while ignoring or enabling an environment where workers felt anxious, silenced, and disrespected. It's important to note that Blake Lively has never publicly addressed the toxic workplace allegations linked to Preserve, nor has she commented on her brother's alleged behavior. But with multiple sources now speaking out, the pressure for accountability is mounting. The question now is not just what Blake Lively knew, but why she hasn't said anything since. Was this a case of willful ignorance, misplaced trust in a sibling, or a calculated decision to protect her brand image at all costs? As more details emerge, the once glowing legacy of Preserve may be remembered less for its artisanal candles and linen napkins, and more for the silent damage done in the shadows. Just when it seemed the chaos couldn't get any worse, it did, and in the most spectacularly unprofessional way imaginable. In early 2015, the team at Preserve planned what was supposed to be a glamorous, high-profile photo shoot. This shoot would take place at Blake Lively's lavish Westchester County mansion. The intention? To showcase Blake as the stylish, hands-on visionary behind the brand, a domestic goddess meets fashion icon. But reality didn't match the fantasy. Employees and a hired fashion model arrived at the estate, eager to start the shoot. But Blake? She didn't show up. For over 2 hours they waited. Cold, tired, frustrated. Then, finally, she appeared. And not with grace or poise, according to insiders. No, staff say Blake stumbled out of her home looking an absolute mess. Visibly disheveled, completely unprepared, and uninterested. The grand idea that she would personally style the shoot? A joke. Her entire contribution reportedly consisted of casually handing over a few accessories, like bracelets, to throw into the mix. That was it. The shoot was a disaster. With Blake flaking, it was once again up to Eric, who, let's not forget, had zero experience in fashion or branding, to save the day. And his idea of a solution? Pulling in untrained film students from a local school to act as interns and crew. For free. Sources describe the shoot as frantic, unorganized, and exhausting. Some employees worked 20 hours a day, not because of any ambitious creative vision, but because the operation was so deeply dysfunctional. There was no schedule, no leadership, just panic, pressure, and exhaustion. The photo shoot wasn't just a failed branding moment, it was the breaking point. What was supposed to be a polished, media-ready showcase of Preserve's image became a behind-the-scenes meltdown that exposed the deep rot at the company's core. It was a perfect metaphor, a brand built on curated perfection, held together by dysfunction, entitlement, and a complete disregard for the people actually doing the work. But even after this disaster, after employees were pushed to their limit, unpaid, overworked, and humiliated, Blake Lively didn't step in to course correct. She didn't ask questions or offer solutions. She remained blissfully detached, shielding her brother from any accountability. And that silence, that inaction, it spoke louder than any staged photo ever could. If you thought the photo shoot chaos was bad, wait until you hear about the daily nightmare Preserve employees endured in their so-called office. Because here's the kicker. Preserve didn't have a traditional office. Nope. The entire company was run out of Eric Lively's cramped Manhattan studio apartment. That's right, a living space doubled as a workplace, and it quickly became a toxic pressure cooker. Imagine showing up to work, and instead of a professional office, you find a disorganized, unfurnished loft where the lines between personal life and business have not just blurred, they've completely vanished. There was no separation between Eric's private quarters and the work area. A bed was literally part of the same room where employees were expected to work, strategize, and create. Yes, a bed. Employees reportedly joked, or maybe cringed, about the boss's bed being just feet away. Staff whispered about the grime, the odors, and the distinct possibility that those sheets hadn't seen a proper wash in weeks. Some joked it was like working in a frat house with a, quote, creepy landlord. But it wasn't just weird, it was downright unprofessional and hazardous. According to former employees, the atmosphere in that cramped apartment was chaotic, unpredictable, and often hostile. Eric would regularly come into work high, smoking pot and popping prescription pills, all while the office reeked of weed. Staff said it smelled like a skunk den, mixed with something worse. And this wasn't some relaxed California cannabis culture. This was a professional workplace in a dense New York building where neighbors were complaining and city inspectors were called. Neighbors filed multiple complaints about noise, disruptive behavior, and the obvious fact that a business was operating in a residential building, which is illegal. Eric's antics weren't just annoying the locals, they were breaking city ordinances. Inside, employees were subject to Eric's volatile moods, one day ordering random, pointless meetings, the next day ignoring critical deadlines. Staff described having to walk on eggshells around him, never knowing when his anger or unpredictability would flare up. There was no management structure, No HR oversight, just Eric's whims dictating everything. And to make matters worse, Eric reportedly left employees outside in the freezing New York cold while he lounged in bed, apparently high and indifferent. Staff waited shivering as he leisurely smoked his weed, entirely ignoring their presence and dedication. Adding insult to injury, paychecks were a mess. Many employees said they were paid late, sometimes so late they couldn't even afford subway fare to get to work. The company's financial instability, paired with Eric's neglect, turned what should have been a dream gig into an exhausting ordeal. And then there was the scandal beneath the surface. Eric was allegedly involved in an affair with one of the employees, despite being married since 2005. This unprofessional relationship added another layer of tension and discomfort among the staff. Rumors swirled, questions were whispered. But with NDAs and legal threats looming, few dared to speak openly. All of this happened under Blake Lively's watch. Despite repeated complaints and a desperate staff meeting with Blake herself, where employees begged for intervention, Blake reportedly refused to acknowledge or address the toxic environment, especially anything involving her brother. She shut down conversations about Eric, leaving her employees feeling abandoned and unheard. The revelations have sparked public debate, especially in light of Blake Lively's own legal actions against Justin Baldoni for workplace misconduct. Observers note the irony of Blake calling for accountability and transparency from Baldoni when she refuses to hold herself or her brother to the same standards. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and have a wonderful day.